Something weird is happening. Millions of people wake up early, work hard, pay their bills, do everything society tells them to do, and yet they never become wealthy. Not poor, not struggling, just permanently stuck, year after year, decade after decade. And the strange part is that many of these people are doing almost everything right. They get degrees, they build careers, they avoid reckless spending, they save money when they can. Yet somehow wealth always seems to stay just out of reach. Now, most people assume they know why. They think wealthy people simply work harder, or take bigger risks, or got lucky. But if that were true, why do so many hardworking people remain stuck, while others seem to pull further ahead every year? The numbers don't quite add up. And once you start looking closely, a much bigger story begins to emerge.
The popular explanation sounds simple. Wealthy people are disciplined. Everyone else isn't. End of story. It's a neat explanation. It's also incomplete. Because if discipline alone created wealth, then teachers, nurses, engineers, construction workers, and millions of other hardworking people would be dominating the wealth rankings. Many of them work longer hours than people who earn dramatically more. Many are incredibly disciplined. Many sacrifice for decades. Yet most never accumulate significant wealth. So what exactly is going on? Why does effort often produce income, but not necessarily wealth? That question leads us to something far more interesting. Because the game most people think they're playing isn't actually the game being played.
For most of human history, wealth worked differently. If you wanted more resources, you generally had to produce more. More crops, more goods, more labor, more output. Your wealth was closely tied to what you physically created. But modern economies changed the rules. Today, there are two very different systems operating at the same time. The first system is familiar. You trade time for money. Work an hour, get paid. Work more hours, get paid more. Simple. The second system is much less obvious. Money itself begins producing more money. Assets generate income. Investments grow. Businesses expand. Ownership compounds. And here's where things start getting strange. Most people spend their entire lives focused on the first system. Meanwhile, a small percentage gradually move into the second. The gap between those two worlds grows larger every year. But that still doesn't explain why. And this is where the mystery begins. Imagine two people. Both earn exactly the same salary. Both live in the same city. Both start at the same age. Both are equally intelligent. 20 years later, one has a net worth of several $1,000,000. The other is still living paycheck to paycheck. How is that possible? Most people immediately assume spending habits. And yes, that matters, but not nearly as much as you might think, because something else is happening beneath the surface, something most people never notice. The financial system rewards one behavior far more aggressively than any other. Not working, not saving, not even earning. Ownership. And once you understand that distinction, an uncomfortable question appears. If ownership is so powerful, why aren't more people accumulating it? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. People don't have enough money. But that explanation falls apart surprisingly fast, because income alone doesn't guarantee wealth. History is full of high earners who ended up broke. Professional athletes, celebrities, lottery winners. People who earned more money in a year than most families earn in decades, yet somehow lost it all. Meanwhile, there are janitors, teachers, office workers, and mechanics who quietly accumulated fortunes. That doesn't make sense, at least not until you realize something. Income determines how much money enters your life. Ownership determines whether that money stays. Think of income like water flowing through a pipe. Most people focus entirely on increasing the flow. Bigger salary, better job, more overtime, more hustle. But if the bucket underneath has holes in it, increasing the flow only solves the problem temporarily. And here's the weirdest part. Modern life is exceptionally good at creating holes. The first hidden reason most people never become wealthy is that the entire system is optimized for consumption. Everywhere you look, someone is competing for your attention, and ultimately, your wallet. Companies spend billions studying human psychology, not because they're curious, because understanding behavior is profitable. The average person encounters thousands of marketing messages every day. Many are subtle, some are almost invisible. Buy this, upgrade that, you deserve it, treat yourself. It's like being on a diet while living inside a bakery. Eventually, temptation wins. Now here's the important part. Consumption itself isn't the problem. Everyone spends money. The issue is what spending replaces. Every dollar spent today loses the opportunity to become an asset tomorrow. And that trade-off compounds over time, slowly at first, then dramatically. But this still isn't the deepest explanation, not even close. Because the real advantage isn't spending less, it's understanding compounding. And most people radically underestimate how powerful compounding actually is. Human brains are surprisingly bad at understanding exponential growth. We're wired for linear thinking. If something grows steadily, we understand it. If something doubles repeatedly, our intuition breaks. That's why compounding feels boring in the beginning. The first years hardly seem worth the effort. Progress is slow, sometimes invisible, which creates a dangerous illusion. It feels like nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, the math is quietly working. Then, eventually, the curve bends, and suddenly growth begins accelerating. The problem is that many people quit before reaching that point. They stop investing, they cash out, they lose patience, or they never start at all because the early results seem insignificant. It's a bit like planting an orchard and getting frustrated because there aren't apples next week. Technically understandable, financially disastrous. But even compounding isn't the full story. There's one deeper layer that ties everything together. The biggest reason most people never become wealthy has very little to do with intelligence, and much more to do with incentives. Most people are taught how to earn money. Very few are taught how wealth actually works. School teaches employment. Society celebrates consumption. Advertising encourages spending. Social media rewards appearances. Meanwhile, ownership receives surprisingly little attention. The result? Many people spend decades becoming excellent workers, but never become owners. And ownership is where wealth behaves differently. Owners benefit from productivity they didn't personally create. Owners benefit from growth happening while they sleep. Owners benefit from systems that continue operating whether they're actively working or not. That sounds unfair, and in some ways, it is. But fairness isn't really the point. Understanding the rules is. Because whether we like the system or not, ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It simply means someone else benefits instead. And suddenly, the mystery starts making sense. The wealth gap isn't always about who works hardest. Often, it's about who owns what.
So, why do most people never become wealthy? Not because they're lazy, not because they're unintelligent, not because they failed. The deeper reason is that they spend their entire lives inside one side of the system, the side built around earning, while wealth is primarily created on the side built around ownership. One side pays you for your time, the other pays you for your assets. One resets every morning, the other compounds continuously. And the longer that difference exists, the larger the gap becomes. The people who eventually build significant wealth aren't necessarily playing harder. They're often playing a different game entirely. A game many people don't even realize exists until years later, sometimes decades later. And by then, the math has already been running. Which brings us to an uncomfortable question. If wealth is largely driven by ownership, what happens in a future where fewer and fewer people own productive assets? What happens when the gap between earners and owners keeps widening? Nobody knows exactly how that story ends, but one thing is certain. The next decade won't be decided solely by who works the hardest. It may be decided by who understands the difference between earning and owning. Because once you see that distinction, you start noticing it everywhere. And after that, it's impossible to unsee. Most people spend their lives trying to earn more money.
The people who become wealthy eventually realize something different. The goal was never just to earn money. The goal was to own things that earn money for you. And that simple shift in perspective may explain more about wealth than almost anything else.